I think we're live. Is everyone here at the meeting to kind of do their different roles tonight? It looks like, are we missing quite a few people?
I didn't think we
need a president.
I got Tony, Dave Powell, Katie, Tom Lind, Denny Albrink, and Don Lindeman.
Yeah,
And the entire council is here.
right. The meeting started, Randy.
Okay.
You want to start it?
Yeah. Join me for the Our Father. Our Father who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done on earth as it is in heaven. Give us this day our daily bread, and forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil. Amen. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, liberty and justice for all. Carla, could I have roll call, please?
Mr. Powell?
Here.
Mr. Gertz?
Here.
Mr. Lynn?
Here.
Mr. Albright?
Here.
Mr. Lindeman?
Here.
Mr. Fischescher?
Here.
Mrs. Edichico?
Here.
Okay, a little before we get into the ordinances, I gotta tell you guys that because I didn't anticipate running this meeting, I do not have video. All I've got is names in front of me. So whoever makes motions and seconds, I need you to do it by name also, so I know who's doing it. And with that, Carla, could we have our first ordinance?
An ordinance to make appropriations for the current expenses and other expenditures of the City of Reading, State of Ohio, during the period ending April 30th, 2021.
Albright, motion made to do away with, to eliminate the second and third reading.
Powell, second.
A motion by Mr. Albrink, second by Mr. Powell to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Gertz?
Yeah.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Albright?
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
Motion
Powell,
to
motion
adopt.
to adopt.
Okay, I got two. Could you reiterate who wants to do it?
Dave Powell.
Dave Powell wants to adopt?
Yeah,
Okay,
Powell motion to
first, okay.
Edichico to second.
All right, there we go.
Okay, motion by Mr. Powell, second by Mrs. Edichico to accept the, or to pass the ordinance. Any discussion? Okay, could I have roll call, please?
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Gertz?
Yes.
Mr. Lynn?
Yes.
Mr. Albright?
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman?
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher?
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico?
Yes.
Ordinance passed. Ordinance number.
2020-53.
Our next ordinance, please.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to execute an amendment agreement with the City of Cincinnati on behalf of its Greater Cincinnati Waterworks, GCWW, and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Go ahead.
It's my understanding that this is just an extension for 1 year, basically the same parameters that we've had in the past. Is that correct?
That I believe Don is correct. I'm trying to find it real quick here.
Anybody know where the safety service director is? Explain some of this.
It's through December 31st, 2021. So yes, it is strictly for a year.
Motion to suspend the rules for the second and third reading.
Edichico, I'll second.
Okay, motion by Mr. Lindeman, second by Ms. Edichico to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell?
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
yes,
Tom Lynn, motion to adopt.
Second, Albrecht.
Motion by Mr. Lynn, second by Mr. Albrecht to adopt the ordinance. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman, Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
I'm sorry, Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
yes,
2020-54.
Okay, ordinance did pass. Our next ordinance, please.
An ordinance authorizing the Safety Service Director to purchase an international dump truck for the Public Works Department for $120,927.84 and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Go ahead.
I understand from Mr. Ross that he could also borrow the money for 2.3% interest over 5 years. I'd like to entertain that thought. We don't know what's going to happen, and we might need that $120,000.
I'd rather pay for it.
I agree with Mr. Lindeman. I'd like to at least have a second reading and find out what the cost is. I ran a quick amortization today. I didn't get a schedule out, but for 2.3% was like, first year was about $2,800. I think over 5 years, it might be, I don't know, average about 10,000, but we haven't had a heavy salt use, I don't think, in the last year or two. And if that changes, that could cause us to need some money in that fund. Number two, as Mr. Lindeman said, I don't know whether what our financial position will be. Is right now, I think we're holding our own for what we did last year, but that's below our expectations of what we had in the budget for another 3 to 5%. And thirdly, there may be areas of the city where I think paving could be done. I think curbs and gutter sidewalks should be extended on North Reading Road. It may be assessed, it may not be. I think there may be some needs or uses. So for the
Mr. Fisher.
period of time, at least a look. I talked to Mr. Ross, and he said there's no emergency for this. They got 30 days to still award a contract. We could vote on it next Tuesday, or just at least give some thought.
Okay, so
And I'm
does
sorry.
everybody?
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I wanted to jump in real quick and just say that Mr. Ross did reach out to me and ask for my thoughts on this particular item because of some of the freeing up that we've done with leases and loan amounts. I was in support of purchasing this in full. Just to let everybody know, he did discuss this a little bit with me. And I just wanted to make everyone aware. We kind of did the math, and we also, looked at the fund, which he sent you guys the breakdown of the fund. And we did have a meeting on this. So I just wanted to let everybody know that I would be in support of purchasing it in full.
Any other discussion?
Comment? If anybody else has any thoughts, I'd like to hear them.
I mean, if we've got the money, I think we should buy it. I can't see going into debt if we don't have to.
I think that, we've been borrowing a lot of stuff and for a lot of vehicle or pieces of equipment. And I think if we got the money, and he's indicated that there is additional monies there available even after we were to do this. So I'd like to not continue to have a longer and longer and longer list of things that we're borrowing for. We've got all the skip projects and everything else that they're borrowing, and so I'd like to to purchase that outright and get that off our books.
I agree with Randy and Denny. The funds are there, Sabrina's
The
on
skip
board.
project- The skip projects are funded out of are coming from a different fund, by the way, and it's very healthy. I don't have it in front of me, but my last calculation was in the neighborhood of $500,000 or $750,000 for the skip projects. This is not coming out of that fund, it's coming out of street maintenance. In street maintenance, we do employ some people. The Chief of Public Works is looking to employ more people. I hope that we can do that. And I'm apprehensive about, as I mentioned earlier, about the next ensuing couple of years. So I can't support paying cash personally, but that's up to the rest of them.
I personally would be in favor of paying cash if we have the money. Borrowing it, I mean, even if we are getting a good interest rate and stuff, it just, if we can pay cash, I'd rather do that, and then we know where we stand.
Okay, could I get a motion?
Sure, motion to suspend the rule for the second and third reading.
I'll second. Chico.
Okay, we have a motion by Mr. Lindeman, second by Ms. Chico to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading. Roll call, please.
Sorry. Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
No,
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman, Mr. Lindeman. Oh, sorry. Mr. Fish Usher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Okay, motion passed.
Motion to adopt, Tom Lind.
Second, Don.
Motion by Mr. Lynn, second by Mr. Lindeman to adopt the ordinance. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
I'll vote yes.
Okay.
Reluctantly.
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fish Usher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Motion is adopted. Motion, ordinance is adopted. Ordinance number.
2020-55.
Our fourth ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the adjustment of appropriations in the following general fund accounts and declaring an emergency.
Motion to
Discussion.
suspend the second and third reading.
Discussion.
Who was the first?
Mrs. Edichico.
Okay, we have Ms. Chico made a motion, second by Mr. Lindeman to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading. Roll call.
Who was the
I
second?
believe Mr. Lindeman was wanting discussion. I believe the
Oh.
second came from Mr. Lind.
Second was Mr. Lind.
No, it
It was
wasn't.
Mr. Albrecht.
It doesn't make any difference.
Mr. Lindeman, did you need discussion?
Well, Patrick's not here, so actually, I don't think there can be much discussion other than this. Hertz, he's head of finance. Does he have any comments on it?
Hey, Mr. Lindeman, I did do some research, so I went down through some of these general fund after our talk earlier today, and the council change of 17.9, some of the big factors for changing that to increase that amount come from the drainage analysis system report. That was $5,200 by RVP Engineering. And then we also had about $8,900 in dues and subscriptions. The American Legal Publishing did a lot of updating work, and that was, you know, some different charges throughout the year at different times. And also a lot of the different Ohio Municipal League have asked us, given us our invoices early for 2021. So I already have those paid in this year. So that was a little bit of the increase. as well as the newsletter that went out, and everything else in council stayed the same. If I kind of moved to my office, there was a lot of changes with infrastructure. We had to do some changes with the software before we even did the software server project. Some of those things had to be prepaid, and that was paid out of my cost center, as well as a new to me printer to print the checks on, which is completely archaic if anyone's been in my office, but it had to be done. So those are some changes, as well as the adjustment to my salary that wasn't completely done until this settle up at the end of the year. When I moved down, some of the other ones, administration, there was 15,000 in charges, and that's also from some of the legal stuff that had to be done, which also the council has some of that in their arena. But then we get to some of our deficits and service and garage. Some of the $40,000 decrease and the $59,000 decrease is kind of made up by a non-general fund item, which we'll talk about next time, which is the street maintenance, because some of the salaries are paid out of there, and some of the projects worked on this year by our service department, there was a little bit of move around, plus loss of people and or retirement. And the 055, the other operating, that was a large increase of 98,000 this year. And let me get to that section to kind of tell you some of the increases on the 055. We've also employed a different company to do management of our systems, which is like, you know, Slingshot Solutions to do that. So with that comes a different price. We worked with a contractor piece by piece, one thing here and there, and now we're getting a comprehensive system. So a lot of these general fund purchases that increased have a lot to do with that. And when I look into other operating costs, a big portion of that is the treasurer fees at the state of Ohio, as well as the auditors, the Plattenberg. When they do the 2-year audit, that is a huge increase. So the auditor and treasurer fees alone in the other operating for 98,000 include 53,000 worth of, you know, all those things from the half real estate to the gap for 2019 and the 2-year audit included. So all those prices are set by the state of Ohio. So we don't have much, you know, control over the pricing of that. And then when I look into insurance and taxes, just the premium and liabilities, that's a $43,000 line item for, and I'm talking about the 055 still. So bear with me as I go down the list. A lot of this is definitely standard purchases, just jumped up a lot. And I'm trying to see if there's anything else in the 055. It's pretty much the audit when I take the $53,000 and then the $43,000 for the different liabilities for insurance and taxes, that is the make up that extra amount. When I jump down to police, you know, the negative 40,000, we had a lot of moving parts with that. New chief, new positions, people leaving. So that was helpful for the decrease. The street lighting increase, there were a lot of poles hit this year. So that is an increase of that as well. And then the fire decreased by 55,000. And then everything else is kind of in line. And then the garbage increased a little bit. But that's just charges for, we had several days where people could come to the city to drop off garbage and things. So those 40-yard dumpsters, that's all paid out of that fund every time those are replenished. We had the big flood. We had a couple of days on Saturdays where people could drop off. And then as our service department works, you know, those things get filled up as well. I think that's the comprehensive analysis I have for the general fund. Does anybody have any questions on that?
Thank you, Sabrina. I think that's an excellent description of these things. So I appreciate that. It certainly helps clear things up a little bit for me.
Thank you, Sabrina. I do agree with him. Nice job.
Thank you. No problem. Anytime. And like I said, it just takes me time to research to get all that background.
Any other questions? Okay, I think we have a motion on the floor to suspend the second and third reading. Could I have a roll call, please?
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes.
Mr. Lind,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischescher,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Motion to adopt.
Second by Tom Lind.
Second, Albrecht.
Motion to adopt by Mr. Lindeman, second
Yes.
by Mr. Lind. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes,
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Ordinance passes. Ordinance number.
2020-56.
And our last ordinance.
An ordinance authorizing the increase of appropriations in the following non-general funds and declaring an emergency.
Discussion.
Go ahead, Don.
I think Sabrina was going to address a couple of these.
Yep, this is super straight up for my ordinances. For this ordinance for the non-general fund street maintenance, the big increase is the payroll. It went from $6,000 or $7,000 to, you know, about 10 and 11,000 up to 12,000 throughout the end of the year, and that's because of all the projects. Think about the movement of the service department, John Vance at a different position, Matt Morgan. This is just a testament to the different things that were able to be worked on by the city, you know, things like that, warmer days. You've seen the crews out, kind of. I think this is where the transparency part comes in of why the increase in the street maintenance arena. So there's pooled payroll from that. The drug enforcement fund, that is strictly the police, whatever they choose to do. I know education materials, things like that. That's why the increase of about $4 grand. And also, if we ever have to pay back anybody that was arrested, I believe, so that money comes out of this fund, and we had some hefty paybacks of money that was on people that got their case was finished, completed, they were charged and convicted, but due money back. So that's this fund. The grant fund, the reason why the increase in the takedown of this was the CARES Act. When we think about early on the CARES Act, we all called our auditors, what do we do with this money, blah, blah, blah. They said, put it in a grant fund, and then until they make their decision. And then when they made their decision, it was mid through the year. And we were told we had to create a brand new fund, which is the 501. So that we didn't spend that much money in the grant fund. I just had to move the money. Actually, the treasurer's office moved the money into the COVID relief fund, which is a new created fund. And we have to keep that like that on the books for this year. And then that fund will go away once it's done. So then, you know, we have the new appropriation for that because that's what was taken out, and I had to move to the general fund in the 242 by the ordinance you guys passed last time. Then we get to the 801, and let me quickly, because I know the exact expenditure on that. When we do the book that goes out with all the different businesses in it, that's when this fund gathers money. And so that was done, I think maybe even last year, or the year before. So we had some extra money in there, and that was used for, let's see, a total of $10,000. So that's why the increase of $7,500. And I would have to look up those MasterCard purchases, but it did make sense of what was used on that. And I don't recall unless anybody else does off the top of their head.
Huh? You're not on? No. Oh, yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any other questions?
just a question, Sabrina. Going into this, are they money unappropriate?
I'm sorry, what? I can't hear you.
Can't either.
Money- Were these,
Can't
were
hear.
these monies that were moved? Never mind, in hell.
What were these monies that you started to be okay at the end? Were these monies moved what?
Unappropriated funds. Were they moved from unappropriated funds?
The 401 to the 501 is.
I'm looking at the 210 fund maintenance.
Uh-huh.
That were surplus funds that we moved into their fund unappropriated at the beginning of the year, because sometimes there are monies that are appropriated because we them.
I'm sorry, I don't have the information off the top of my head for money that was put in there. I can look. I'm not exactly sure about the 210 of what's been dumped in there. I'm sorry.
I'll talk to you at a later date then when we can talk about it.
Okay.
Okay, any other questions? Could I get a motion to suspend?
Motion to suspend, Albrecht.
Second, Don Lindeman.
Motion by Mr. Albrecht, second by Lindeman to suspend the rule requiring a second and third reading. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
Yes,
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Motion to adopt, Tom Lind.
Second.
I'll second Edichico.
Motion by Mr. Lynn, second by Ms. Edichico to adopt the ordinance. Roll call, please.
Mr. Powell,
Yes.
Mr. Gertz,
yes,
Mr. Lynn,
Yes.
Mr. Albrecht,
Yes.
Mr. Lindeman,
Yes.
Mr. Fischesser,
Yes.
Mrs. Edichico.
Yes.
Ordinance passes. Ordinance number.
2020-57.
Hey, and
Are there
Jody,
any
just
other
a,
ordinances?
No.
Okay.
move to adjourn.
I have one question, Randy.
Go ahead.
I know you came into this at the last minute, evidently. I did have a request in from Chris if our attorney was going to be here tonight for an executive meeting, but I didn't hear anything back from him. Did
He
you
is,
hear anything?
I can answer that for you. Yes. I was going to talk to Drew. Drew, I guess you're listening. We will need an executive session at the next meeting.
Okay.
I can tell you, the only thing I can tell you is that the school board is meeting an executive session tonight.
They met at 5:30.
Okay. Then you know more than I do, Don, because I just knew it was going to be tonight.
Okay.
Okay, if anybody has nothing else, why don't we wrap this up so I can get back to my party? And
Hey, before we leave, let's
Go
hope
ahead.
next year's better.
Yes.
yeah,
Thanks,
I
Dave.
agree, David. I
agree.
hope it's a better year.
Yep.
Happy New Year to everybody. Be safe.
got it.
yes.
Thank
Happy
you.
Happy New Year.
Happy
Happy
New
New
Year.
Year.
New Year.
Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
Take care, guys.
All right.
Bye. Be